All right, everyone, welcome. This is week 17, and this is the second to the last week of this course. This week, we are going to try to complete our model creation for our maternity registration. In previous lessons, we have created the users model where we will use the login register system. We have created the maternity model where we have two tables or two models for the maternity. One is going to hold the personal information of the client, and the other will hold all other registration and baseline information. And then we have a pregnancy model where we created two tables also, one to register a pregnancy and the other to record the risk assessment of the pregnancy. Let's create more tables within the pregnancy model. We can either do this within the pregnancy model or create a new model, and we'll say this new model is going to be a follow-up model for a pregnancy. So let's create this within this. So we can either do it here or just create a new model. Since everything is about one pregnancy, I'll prefer to do it here. So let's say pregnancy follow-up. So let's think about this. When someone is pregnant, the person goes to the clinic and registers for antenatal. The same person can get pregnant again down the line and come back for antenatal for a different pregnancy, not the first one. The structure we are trying to create is to have a maternity account for everybody who comes in the first time. And for subsequent pregnancies, we only want to register the pregnancy under the same maternity account, so that all of the birth records or all of the antenatal records for each of the pregnancies are all linked and points to one person or the person who has the record. For that structure, we created the antenatal maternity table, and for that table we use the name client. Every time a person walks in, we want the person to be identified by a unique number, which is the patient number that we use for the client account. This holds all of the demographic information of the person. Then we have registration information, which holds other information like medical history, ethnicities, and all of the other information about the person. These are all sensitive information, and we cannot use this information to immediately identify a person without having the demographic information. So we separated the tables into two. Then we created a table that registers the pregnancy, and we give that pregnancy a unique number we call pregnancy number. This pregnancy is linked to a particular patient, and we call that the patient number. So the parent table in this pregnancy reg table or preg reg table is the pregnancy number. Patient number is a foreign key from the client table. We created all of this link to keep the integrity. Now we want to create a new table called follow-up, and we'll say, let's say this is pregnant follow-up. Now, using the same hypothetical scenario, a lady is pregnant. She walks into the clinic. They register her for antenatal. She has a new card. She comes every 2 weeks, 3 weeks for appointment, depending on her risk factors or the risks of that pregnancy. She's given appointments to always come for follow-up appointments. Every time she comes, they fill new forms of her symptoms, review symptoms. If there are any tests that are done, they put it in that record or that file. Let's call that file the maternity record, and let's call all of the forms that go in all the things associated with that pregnancy. Now, if this lady every year gets pregnant and comes, we use a unique identifier to know which form belongs to which of the pregnancies, and that's why we have the pregnancy number. So when the pregnancies are grouped within the same antenatal record, we're able to retrieve information from one pregnancy. Now, this follow-up is something that will be done frequently. And in the front end, how we imagine it is going to be an encounter form. Every time the person comes, it's just going to be like a patient note form, where every time a patient walks in, the doctor has a blank sheet to write the note for that visit. Every new time, there's a new note. So what separates one note from the other are the dates of the notes. So knowing this and having the form we have in our course resource, we want to have the follow-up form. We just have an ID here to be the index. We want to have the pregnancy number so that we'll know what pregnancy that note was associated with. So this is still a foreign key. Now, the other columns are the things that we want to decide. So we'll leave the date created there. We can even have date updated if we need it updated, but for now, we are doing it as basic as possible. But in your final project and in your assignment 5, you need to do it and think like a developer. Like I said in last week's lesson, we are going to just do this as basic as possible and work our way up to cleaning it up to be as professional as possible. So we have the pregnancy number that is a foreign key. Let's put the date of visit. Okay, and let's say the date of visit is let's just use the timestamp for now. Then we want to have, when the person comes at that visit, you want to know maybe the gestational age at visit. Now this is, let's make this string. So if you want to write it in weeks, mapped string. You see that we want to do it like here it was is a EDD is specified. Either we want to make it automatic, that it just inserts automatically based on the EDD that we have and the present date. But for now, let's not think about that logic. Let's just put gestational age and let's just put it in as a string. That way we will be able to control what goes in there. So let's make it a string for now. Then we want to do the vital signs, for instance. So let's say weight. Let's put blood pressure. Let's get the fundal height, the fetal heart rate. We want to look at. So maybe in this visit, at this visit, they'll do a dipstick. So let's say proteinuria. If we make it choices, let's create the choices here. I'll call this urea and change it there, and I'll put this choice of plus plus, let's say 0. And then we put another one as 1 plus. And let's say 2 plus 4 plus. Let's say 2 plus. And let's put and let's say no test. So urea is the choices, and we'll come here and change it to be so we want to ask questions like, well, let's say we have another urine culture, and let's say it was ordered at the last visit and we have a result. Let's name this culture. And we create the choices. Now this is not the most professional way, but I'm doing it this way for for you to be able to see how we break down the logic and get an understanding of what it is that we are doing before you begin to optimize your code and write these things in a more Pythonic and professional way. Because at this point now you understand it. If I go straight to doing things in short form, I'm already well thought through, you will find it difficult to understand and to follow. So we're taking it baby steps, step by step, and you understand the logic and the reasoning why we do the things we do. Okay? So we have culture as the choices. And let's say this is positive, this is negative. So put positive. Negative, and let's say let's put pending, for instance. There's no results. Maybe the sample was just taken. Okay, so let's have these choices. So we have urine culture. We want to have let's say we are asking questions like, if the client has started maybe new habits after the last visit, so let's say how many cigarettes a day since after the last visit, or if the client lives with somebody that smokes or takes recreational drugs. So let's look at the risks. So there are two ways we can think about this. Either we want to fill it on the follow-up form, or we want to always update the risks at every visit and save a copy of a new risk at every visit. Now, I would choose always updating, having updatable forms. Because in real life situation, you want to work smart and not hard. If you have a risk form that is updatable, every time the clients come, you just update the risks, go through the risks again and update them. Not overwriting the previous value, but saving a new copy for that visit. That way, you will have the history of risks. The person started the pregnancy without having all of these alcohol problem or substance use problem, and the person progresses at a particular visit and the gestational age was a particular age, and the person now picked up these habits or is now involved in these habits at that point in the pregnancy. So we're not going to collect those information twice because we want to build something good. So I won't put that there. You can also track glucose also. We'll leave that here. Let's assume that we don't have an idea. We'll just go by the form and we will just look at a symptom review. So let's look at the kind of things that they will fill in at a follow-up visit. So they check the fundal height, the fetal heart rate. Let's assume that they will check or they want to give nutritional supplements at this visit. So let's just say it's a basic visit. They're not going to do anything extreme. They just check for this and give supplements. So let's have choices of yes, no, and we have choices there. So we'll just ask something like iron and we'll use choices. We'll have folate, map choices. Let's do calcium and multivitamins or mineral. So let's stop here. We now have a follow-up form, and this follow-up form will just collect basic things like the fundal height, the fetal heart rate, and then let's just have something like other symptoms. And so they can list symptoms here. Okay, so let's stop here. We want to create something else for the label. We now have the pregnancy registration, we have pregnancy follow-up. So let's do the label form. Does everybody understand what I'm trying to do? Is everybody following?
Yes, we are following. Yeah.
Okay. So we want to have a labor form now. And for this labor, let's remove all of these dates and let's fill in the information on the form. So we have, let's say, date of admission. Let's look at the admission time. Let's look at the time active labor started. Let's look at the time membrane ruptured. Let's look at the time second stage started, time of delivery, let's say oxytocin, time given, let's have placenta complete, so let's like live birth, stillbirth, neonatal death, maternal death. So we'll choose yes, no in those stages. If there is resuscitation, let's do that. And let's do maternal transfusion also. Let's have birth weight. Let's do the ABGA score 1 to 5. Let's put mode of delivery, gestational age, let's have more than one fetus. Let's have fetal line. Let's have fetal presentation. During the labor, let's say we want to take things like blood pressure, fetal heart rate, cervical dilation. Let's say it's being recorded at every point. So let's do that 1 to 12. I'm thinking of a way this can be done even more optimized, but let's just leave them loose for now. Let's write for 12 stages, stages 1 to 12. Let's look at the blood pressure. So let's just write blood pressure here. So we're doing this in any order. We could have had this in the order in which the activities will be recorded. The blood pressure will start from the beginning and will be taken at different intervals, right? Let's say temperature, pulse. And let's do pulse. Let's see if there's a problem. Action taken. Let's stop here for the labor record. Okay. Let's now create something else and we call this the pathograph. But before we do that, let's try to run this and make sure that this labor and this follow-up models are created. So I'm going to go to my app file and I'm going to run. Then I'll go to my table. I will have to recreate all of this. So what will happen is, let me drop this maternity records and let's do everything all over again. Okay. So I'm going to run this and let's see this. So we don't have the new models created here, and remember that we have to make sure that we are importing them on our app file and then we are asking it to create those models. So here we use users, pregnancy, maternity, and we have asked it to create the risk assessment, but we've not asked it to create the other tables on it. Now we are doing it to create one after the other. We have preg risk assessment created, preg follow-up, and preg labor are what we want to create. So we'll just copy this and add it there so you can create those tables. So we have preg follow-up and preg labor to be created. And by the time we refresh our page, we have those tables created. Now, every time you create this, you always want to look at the structure to make sure that your foreign keys and everything you want are in the order in which they're supposed to be. Okay? And if we come to the table and we look at the designer, we can easily see how these tables are linked, and we don't have to collect the same information more than once. So in next week's lesson, week 18, we're going to really look at how to look through this model and use it to plan our functions, the functionalities, what goes where, and how we're going to use that to go where it's supposed to go to. So let's finish creating the models now. So we have done the labor record, the follow-up record. Let's do a record we call the pathograph record. So for your assignments, I want you to just follow the information on the form and create form columns for where those form fields will be saved. So let's say this is pathograph, and we'll put this as pathograph. I want to delete all of this. And what I want to put here is hours since ruptured membrane, rapid assessment, the amniotic fluid, contractions in 10 minutes, that it's supposed to be like a cervical dilatation chart from 4 cm to 10 cm when it is recorded at different times. So let's just create this table now and say we're going to be recording once just for the purpose of this example. So we'll say hours, since, ruptured, membrane. We have rapid assessment, vaginal bleeding, we want fetal heart rate in beats per minute. So let's make this string since we're doing beats per minute. We want to have contractions in 10 minutes. We want to look at urine voided, pulse, blood pressure, cervical dilatation, time of placenta delivery, oxytocin time given. Now, I did this illustration for you to see that two tables contain the same information, pulse problem, and we have some of the information on this labor record, also on the pathograph record. Now, this is for a reason that we're going to see in week 18. I want you to be able to understand how to create a function that will be sending records that are supposed to be duplicated across tables to the tables that are supposed to have those records at the same time. And when it is updated on one table, to be updated on all the tables that collect the same information when there is no foreign key link between those two tables. Now we'll leave this repetition just for us to be able to illustrate that example. Take note that it is the pathograph record and the labor record that have some information that are similar or that are the same stored in both tables without linking those similarities. Okay? Although we have a link of the pregnancy number. And so until we do that, you will understand exactly what it is I'm trying to illustrate here. So we can have one last table, which is the postpartum record. And we can just add this here to create this. Sorry. So we can do the postpartum last. So what I did here was to have the postpartum here before creating it here. Okay. So we'll create the field for postpartum here. I'm going to delete all of this. And then we're going to start. So for postpartum, we want to put the kind of information that are collected during a follow-up visit after a child has been born is, I know they do things like family planning there. They also assess the baby and look for any abnormal signs. They do the maternal blood pressure, the pulse, the postpartum care and hygiene, mostly advice and counseling on nutrition, bed spacing and family planning. For danger signs, give new appointment for follow-up visit. And for baby, advice on the nutrition, exclusive breastfeeding or replacement formula. So let's just use that information to just create random columns for this. So let's say we want to have advice and counsel on bed spacing and family planning. So let it be yes or no. First of all, we'll take blood pressure, date of visit, and weight, blood pressure, and then we have nutrition of baby, let's say family planning, breastfeeding. Let's make these choices since the answer yes or no. Let's look at danger signs. Let's look at that. Let's assume that maybe for any HIV or so, yes or no, not applicable. And let's look at for baby, let's say BCG. And let's see if OPV. Okay, so let's just use these columns as what we want to record for postpartum. But in the real world scenario, this is not exactly what we record. This is just for us to create a hypothetical system. And then when we have the real information in real world, we know how to create the columns that we need. But what we are trying to illustrate is the links between the table and later on how to create the functionalities that will process whatever input comes from the front end and send to these models or database that we are creating. In the event that there is a death during this whole pregnancy and delivery process, we want to have a medical certificate of death where we just record the cause of death or record the death either of the mother or of the baby. So let's have one last model and let's call this death. On the app file, I'm going to copy this and paste. Let's call it date. Now we have the date. We just want to fill in information of date of death, time of death, cause of death, It can't be just one cause of death. Let's put time of death. And now let's say primary cause of death. And secondary cause of death. Other contributing conditions. And then let's say if the deceased is the baby or less than 1 month old, we want to collect the birth weight. If infant. And then we want to put gestational age and stop there. So let's say this is the information we're going to collect for the death, and this concludes all the models that we want to build. So let's recap what we have done. We want to have a login register system where it is role-based or role-controlled, access controlled. We want to have 3 roles: the administrator, the client, and the clinical person. The administrator will be in charge of giving appointments, recording vital signs. The client is like the patient who comes and be able to look at their records and the appointments they have. And the clinical is the one who records all these encounters, birth, labor, all those things that we have there. Now we're going to see, when we start creating our functions next week, how these 3 roles come into play. We also created our maternity model, and in this model we created 2 tables: the client's table that holds sensitive and demographic information or identifiable information of the client, and then we created another table called the registration info that uses that patient number that is contained in the client's table to link the client to other information that they have that are not sensitive but does not directly identify the client. We have the pregnancy model where we created several tables, and all of the tables that we have here are related to the activities of a particular pregnancy, and they're all identified by a pregnancy number. So let's run our app file, make sure all is well, make sure that all of our models are created. And so we have all of the models created. Now the next thing we want to look at is what are the functionalities that we want to have. And we're going to clean all of this up and just use a simple command to create all of our tables if they don't exist. And we have also tried to insert record into the table, test record. We'll do all of that in our final lesson. But what it is we want to achieve is to imagine that we have forms for all of this. And for those of you that came from course 2 and you're in batch A where we do Ginger template, if you want to recall, you can attend this Friday's live class for batch A where we look at Ginger template on building forms. You can try to look at these models and use these models to build template forms for a front end where this data is collected. Now when this data is collected, we want to have functions within different routes that processes the input that is collected from the user from the form. And then when this is processed, we want to send them into the appropriate table for each form. We want to use functional programming so that we want to have a function. For instance, we'll have a function called login. And when the username or the email and the password is entered, we want it to run the function username and that call the function username and passes as arguments the email and the password, and it looks at this and logs in the person and redirects the person to the appropriate page. When it's time for us to do things like we want to register a new antenatal account, we want to have a function that is called, for instance, register client. and we want to be able to pass arguments to this function. And once the argument is passed, it is going to run a function that just processes these arguments and send them where they're supposed to be, based on the input entered by the user. So these are the things we want to achieve. We want to try to use functional programming and create the different functions that will be run, so that if a front-end person comes to create the forms, they already know how these forms or what route to process the form. And these are the things that we are going to look at in next week's lesson. Does anybody have a question? Do you all understand?
Yeah.
All right. So we will meet on Thursday for us to clean up all of this file we've done and do things in a more Pythonic way, for us to now retrace our step back to see what is the best and most professional way to do this, and how do we create our CI/CD pipeline to be able to have our app on the web page. All right, if you have any questions, you need a one-on-one class, you can book one through any of the admin on the WhatsApp group, and I will send the video as soon as it is available, and we'll reopen all assignments for final submissions by Sunday. All right, hello everyone. This is the second lesson of week 17. And in this lesson, we're going to review our class project scenario, the pregnancy registration and maternity reporting system. And we are going to look at what we've done and go further in attempting to clean up our file a little while creating our authentication route. My name is Mildred. Now, for our class project, we have been using different forms to try to create a pregnancy registration and maternity reporting system, and we intend to use this to learn how to develop a back end of the project, and we want to use functional programming for most of the things that we are going to do. For this project, we created a database called maternity records. For this lesson, I have deleted a database and I will create it now. We have in this models folder different models to create tables for users, table for clients, and also for the registration info. We have table for pregnancy registration, we name PregReg. We have a table for PregRisk, and we have a table for Preg follow-up, and a table for Preg labor, a table for pathograph, and a table for postpartum and death. When we run this app file, we are to create all of the table in the database. Now, we've been doing this step by step without doing it in a professional way, so that we can follow how to create this. Now that we are done doing all of this, we can just do something simpler by writing one line of code that can run all the table creation scripts at once, instead of these multiple lines of code. But first of all, let's recall what we have done. In week 11, we introduced Flask, and we looked at how to connect to a database using SQL Alchemy. We also looked at the Amazon EC2 and creating a server, and we looked at, I think in week 13, how to use env files for protecting our sensitive information, and then we use Poetry to manage our dependencies. If you cannot recall what we discussed in those lessons, I would suggest that you pause the video and watch weeks 11 to 13 lessons again to refresh yourself on the concepts that have been discussed, as we will make reference to these concepts. Now, considering these concepts, let us now clean up this file now, and then we will try to use new concepts. So we want to first of all update our dependencies. And if you want to update your dependencies, we use Poetry update like this. So make sure your environment is activated and you just run Poetry update. And if there's any new version of any of your dependencies that are specified here, it will be updated. Now, on the app file that we have, we want to change all of this. to be able to run one line of code to create all the tables. We'll come in here and say, let's remove unused import. Let's say we want to import from model, so let's import base, and we'll not import all of these because we won't use them anymore. So we import base, and let's delete all of this. And we want to just use one line of code to create all of our tables. We will do base.metadata.create all engine. Let's put check first equal to true. Now it can't find the engine, and I think we deleted that, so we can't find that. So let me Control Z and move that back, and then, so I'm not supposed to delete that, I'll delete it. So now I can say create all, and I want check first true. So it will just do if not exist. So this alone will replace the whole lines of code that I just deleted. And so we are making our code cleaner. Previously, we created this utils file where we created a function to insert data into the database because we said we want to do functional programming. We are going to use this later on today. But first of all, let's just delete this out of this place because we don't want to use this anymore because we're inserting trial records. So save this and I'll remove that. So this is what our app file now looks like. The function is now shorter. We don't have all of those individual inserting or individual table creation code anymore. We're creating all the tables at once like that. And now we have all of our code short and simple. Okay, so I will run this and see if the tables are created in the database. Let's look at the database again. We have the database here, maternity records. I recreated the database, so we have no tables in the database. So we want to run that file, and I will run. So I want to go to port 8080 now. Let's refresh this, and we still don't have our tables created. So there's a problem here. Let's import users. Let's import the other table. I'll refresh this, and I have all of the tables created. I'm going to go back to delete that database, recreate it, and we'll see that everything is going to insert this time. Some of the errors we get sometimes, we never find out the reason why it doesn't work and then it starts working. But I'll advise you to always find out why it works and why it doesn't work. You don't want to have your code running by chance. So we have maternity records. We come here. I don't want to insert any data into the tables. I'll take that out. And then I refresh. And when I refresh this, there'll be tables in the database. Maternity records. So we have all the tables created. So the users table, we don't want to insert the record. Only thing I did here was to import this from models, and for whatever reasons the table created with that import. So when you follow through with the work and you begin to have these problems, you try importing that. This is not even supposed to be a problem, importing or not, but for some reason, without changing any of the code, because we can't see anything wrong with our code, that ended up working. Okay, so you just import them, and then when we get to week 18 and we begin to look at standards to use, remove unused imports and do some tests, then we begin to see what, or when we add error handling to that, we begin to see why things happen the way they happen. So we have the table created. We don't want to insert any record in it. We use one line of code to create all of the tables. If you're coming from course 2, we did something we call routing. And routing just means mapping URLs to a specific function that will handle the logic for that URL. Now, to bind a function to a URL, we use a decorator we call app.route like this. So let's say if I put a // like this, I mean the index page. So if I put a / to the index page, and this is running, and I go to the index page, is on port 8080, and I refresh, I have the hello world printed there. So that is what we call routing. You create a function, and you use this decorator to put the URL for that will be used to get to that page. We want to use microservice structure to create files that hold endpoints to the services that we want. We have a source folder here, and we have directories in the source folder for the administrator, the clients, and the clinical. Those are the 3 roles that we defined. And we want files that are specific to these roles to be saved in their different directories. And we want this to all be microservices, which means we are going to be looking at JavaScript object notation. For us to control our imports, we have said previously that we create these init files. And this just makes sure that when you import that package, all of the code that are in the init file will run automatically. This source directory has an init file within it. Let's do something here that we are going to use later. Let's say from app, we want to import. In Python, you can import something and give it a name and alias as you do that. We can import it as app, which doesn't make sense because it's the same name, app as app. You can import it as application or app as route or something, whatever name you want to give it, but use has like this. So I'm using this just to show you that you can actually specify the name that you want to give that package that you have imported. And so anytime you refer to that package, you refer to it as the name that you have given it. Okay, so we'll say from Flask also, we want to import request, and we also want to import, let's just import request. We'll do the other import in another lesson. So let's import request. So let's stop here and we'll use this later. You can say report request as request if you want, and we'll use this later. We'll stop here. So the whole idea is that when we have files here in the directories here, we don't need to add this import. We'll just import from source. And so we don't need to go and import from Flask to import all of this. It is already in this init file that will run automatically when we start using this. So we'll come back to this later. I just did this here for you to understand. And then we can have another init file within each of the subfolder to also control everything as a package. And we'll see why we do that when we summarize on the final lesson. We use request here, and when we say request, and in Flask, request is just an object that contains all of the data that we send from the clients to the server. When we fill a form, we use either a get or a post request. Now, this data is recovered from that get or post method that we use. To be able to illustrate this better, this is not a front-end course, but I will create a folder or a directory called template in the root here, and we will just create a sample registration template to collect data and send to the database for us to see how we can create a route that processes registration form, and then later on we'll change it to create a function that does registration and a function that does login and all of that. So let's create a folder called template. We're going to discuss this in tomorrow's class with batch A when we look at Ginger templates. If you are interested in understanding this front-end part of Flask, you can attend the lesson tomorrow. So I create the directory called template, and I want to create a file here, and the file name will be register.html, and I'll create another one. Let's create another one that will be called response.html. I just want to create basic HTML code here that I will use to illustrate how we'll create a function and be able to collect data from these forms and process it on the app file and send it to the database. Okay, does anybody have any question? Is it clear to everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So here we know the basic way to create a HTML document. I'm not going to be using any base file or templating structure. Let's just create a registration form. So I will create HTML and close HTML. Let's just put some basic style here so we can have some style that will make this look nice. So let's say style, and we close style. We know that we have the head and the body area, so let's just put the head here. It will still work without that, but in order not to make you feel confused, we'll just do this. Because this is not a front-end course, I am not going into details about this. I'll just create a template because one of your prerequisites expects that you already understand this structure. So in the style here, we want to have, maybe for the body, let's just align, do a text align to the center and change the color to gray. Maybe the body color should be somewhere here. Then let's say we are having forms. So let's have input. And for input type text and input type email, let's put the width to be 100%. Let me just accept this and I'll change the values here. So I'll put the width to be 100%. I will put the padding, let's put padding 1220 and margin 80. And let's do a box sizing of border box. Let me stop here. And let me put an input type of submit. And I'll just put any style that comes up. So we just have a basic style here to be able to understand this. But we're going to have a drop down menu on our form. Let's use the select. Let's do a style for the select button. Let's have the width, the padding, margin, and box sizing. Let's just use that. And then we'll stop there and we'll write the body part. Okay. So for the body, we just want to have history, register, new user, and close history. Now we put the form and we close form. Now this form is going to be processed by something we call an action page. We'll specify that at the value here. We're going to look at that soon. And then we want the method to be post. They want to create the form content. So let's say we want to have email. So when we look at the user model here, we have ID, email, password role created as. This is auto increment. We don't need to specify it on the form. This is a timestamp. We don't need to specify. Now we had left with email, password, and role. We don't want to give the users a password. We want them to set their password once they receive maybe a notification of email. So we'll focus on email and role and leave the password blank. Now let's say emails are sensitive information. We don't want this to be stolen. We want the email to be encrypted. We also want the password to be encrypted when the user sets their password. Today we are going to look at how to insert this into the database, leave the password field blank, and encrypt the email. And then in lesson 3 we have on Tuesday, we are going to look at how we will alter this table also, and then put a code row where we can send emails out of the system to ask the user to activate their account and also set their password once they click on the activation link. So now we have the email and the row column to focus on. We want to collect information for these two. So on this form, we're just creating only email field and row field, since these are the two fields we want to collect data for. So let's put input type is equal to email, and the name is equal to email. Let's do it like that. And then we will do row. Since we already have a style for it, we don't need to break, it will work. So role, let's say the role is the select button. Select name is equal to role, and we close our select. And what I like to do is always to put a blank option, and let's put the value of admin of so let's see the roles that we defined here in the source are administrator, client, and clinical. Now when you look at the users model, we have this admin, client, and clinical as enums, and so we want to define the values like that. So we'll come here to define the value the same way we have it there. Admin, this is going to be client, and this is going to be clinical. Change this to clinical. Okay. when we have this form, the user will see the first option by default, and we don't always like to see it that way. So let's put an option that will just ask them to select row like this, or we can just put here to say choose row. Something like this, and the value is blank, like this. So when we have this form, we're going to see how the form is going to look like soon. We'll be able to use this to now select a predefined list of values, since we are using enums to collect these values. Now we are done with this form. We want to put the button that will click to submit the form. So let's say input type submit, the value is submit, and then we close the form. Let's add copyright information. Let's say ampersand copy. Let's do this is automatically inserting things, so say okay. So we have this, we close the body. Let's just use it like this. We're not building the front end, but we just want to have sample code to work with. All right, so we close body, we close the HTML. We have the second template we created, which is the response. All we want to do here is to be able to just display what we entered into the form, like success message or something. So let's just do that so we can have something to work with. Let's just do a style for the body. I'll put the head, and then I will have text align center, and let's make the board color still gray, and then let's just do the body, and then we'll say, now with the Ginger templating, join tomorrow's lesson to recall how we do this. We want to say for key value in results dot items. I will tell you where the result is. I'm working from the back to the front now, and we'll see where we get this results.items from shortly. Let's end the for loop with Ginger templating. Let's just do key value like this, and we'll end for. We want to display the result like this. I will explain this later on. Okay, so we've done this. Let's go back to the app file. We've created templates. We want to create routes. The route we want to create is a route for register and a route for login. Let's do registration today and give you time to rewatch the video and understand what we have done before we rework our step to putting files and routes in which directory they're supposed to be for us to understand better. Now take note that if you just watch this video in isolation, you are not going to be doing things professionally. We are breaking things down. We are doing it with baby steps, so you understand what to do. So you have to watch this sequentially to the last video to get to a professional level. On the app file, we have imported Flask. We've imported the create engine from SQL Alchemy. We imported our setting files that has the definition for all the environment variables. We imported base that we use to create all the data at once. From the utils, we imported insert data. We are going to use it here because we are going to use this function that we have created to insert records. Later on, we are going to add error handling to this and testing to this, where because everything we are going to do, we use functions to perform our operations. We have the function that creates an instance of the Flask app here, and we've created a route to the index page, where when we run that page, we get hello world as stated here. We want to remove that. We want to make sure that when the person comes to the index page, this registration form is displayed. So let's return render template. So for us to return render template, we have to import from Flask. We import Flask, we import render template. Okay, so we want to use that. So here we're going to return, we call the function render template, and we're going to be rendering a template called register.html. Now Flask will always look for templates in a templates directory. So your directory must be named templates to have HTML files in them. If you put your HTML file anywhere, it will not find that file. So we have that called register.html. So let's refresh our page to see that that is the form that is displayed. Now we have our beautiful, nice form that we just created to collect email, and then you select a role here. Now this is not a design class, so we're just creating whatever we can to just get something done. Okay? So we have this displaying the form that we just created. We want to create a route that will actually process whatever the user enters, and we want this to check for a post request on the register route. So we'll do /register, which means that on that form, we want to put the action to be /register, like that. Does everybody understand why we did that?
Yes.
Okay. So the route now is /register, which means that when we come here and we fill a value and click submit, it is going to change the URL to have a /register here to run the function that this is decorated above. So now let's create a function for this. So the route is register, the method is looking for is the post method, and the function is the function called register. So when we put the decorator above the function, so now you understand why we did all of those basic topics, to understand what decorators are and all of those stuff, so that you'll be able to use them here. So for this registration route, we want to check that the request method is post. Let's write this. If you can actually do post and get, if you're coming from course 2, you would have seen that we can handle both post and get here, where we say if the request method is get, display the registration form. If it is post, get the data from the form and do whatever it is that we want to do with that data. But let's handle just post method. But we'll use if request method equal to post here. So if request.method is equal to, let's say is equal to post. So we have not even imported request. Let's render template and request here. So now we have if request.method is equal to post, we want to get the result. Now, why am I using the variable called result? I said I'm working from the back. When we come to the result response.html, we use that variable result here. That's what we named it. So we have to use the same variable. Normally you name it here first before you use it on that file. But I was working from the back. So we'll say result is equal to, let's get the values from the form. We'll just say request.form, and this holds all of the values on the form. And what we want to do now is to, let's say render template response.html. Let's just render the template and then we'll process the form. Let's say response.html. We just want to see that everything is working before we start inserting into the database. Result is equal to result. So I want it to get everything from the form as an array or as a sequence, and then go to the template response.html and dump it there. And that is why we have results.items as the items of that sequence that we have dumped. So that's why here I say for key value in results.items, I want to print out the key and the value. Let's test this to see that it works. I will clear. I will run the app file again. I will refresh my page here. The site cannot be reached. Let's see. It's on port 5000. I have to make it on port 8080. Let me put port. So you can always change your port if your port is in use. So I'll leave this at 8080 and I will quit and run again. So this is port 8080 I will come back here and refresh, and I have it there. So now that this is there, let's enter an email address. And let's choose a role and say admin. And we want to just display the email and the role that was selected. Submit. We have a problem here. The view function for registrar did not have a valid response. We know what the problem is. We'll go back there. And we see register. We create the route register. The method is post. The function name is register. We say request method is equal to post. Result is equal to request.form. We return. We just render template. We do not use return. Okay. So we return render template. Supposed to be aligned here. So we return render template. Result is equal to result. We go back and refresh from our error, and then we have it. Email and role. So this is showing that on the template response, we have an error with our HTML. Here we didn't put style, we just put head, so it is displaying it. So we'll close style. So you can render this as a CSS because it doesn't know that is a CSS. So we have style, and the style we want here is for the body, and we close body. So take note of these mistakes. I will not edit the mistakes because these are mistakes that we have had one-on-one classes for, and really want you to be able to debug your mistakes. So now we have the style applied, the email, and the role selected. So now we see that it is reading these values that entered into the form. It is sending it to the response. Now it is time for us to start the real work, which is create this function properly, where it is going to send the data collected from the form to the database. Does anyone have any question before we do that? Does everybody understand? I want to make sure you understand before I move forward.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So now we don't want to do this anymore. We want to we'll just write some code here, and then we'll still render the template so that it will tell us that it has successfully inserted into the record. Now take note that we said we have this insert data here, and we want to use this function to insert the data. We see the parameters, the engine, the table name, and the keyword tags, because we don't know in advance how many keyword tags will be supplied, and we want to use this to insert record into different tables. It's not just for the user tables. So we created a function that is all purpose. We talked about sensitive information and encryption, and there is a package that we can install to handle encryption and decryption in Flask. The name of that package is Flask Simple Crypt. So one of the first things we want to do here is to add that as a dependency, and we have said that we use Poetry for dependency management, and because of this we'll use Poetry add, and we're adding Flask Simple Crypt like this. I think I'm spelling it C. I think it's T. Yeah, I think this is it. And it should install if we don't have it, and we have that. If we come to our Pi project here, we'll see that that dependency has been added, so we don't need to install it. And anytime anybody clones our projects, you can easily just run the Poetry to install the dependencies that you need all in one go, without the user having to bother about what does it depend on, what do I need to install. Okay, so we have that installed, so we want to use that. We have said that in the users model here that we have ID, email, password, role created. That we want to deal with the email and the role, since these are the only things we're collecting on the form. Timestamp will insert into the created ads, and the ID is auto increment. The password, we want the users to be able to set a password when they receive an activation email. So that we will do in another lesson. See how the system can send out activation emails, and then when they click on the link, it will give them a form to enter the password, that will be encrypted again and saved in the database before they can actually log in to the system. Okay, so let's deal with collecting this data and give you time to understand what we have done before we move forward. We will create an object of that class that we just installed, the simple crypt. We want to import it first since we just installed it. We'll say from Flax simple crypt, import simple crypt. Now in real production, I will normally use AES encryption. We just want to keep it simple, but once you get the concept, you can use any encryption you choose to. So that is why research is very important, for you to know what exists out there. You know the basic idea of how to add your dependencies the way you want it, and then you will use that to begin to use dependencies that we have not taught in class, and you understand how to use them. So simple crypt is what we are importing, and we're going to initialize that somewhere here. Let's say after this, let's just do it here. Let's say cipher is equal to simple crypt, and then let's just use the app secret key. And because we're using the app secret key, let's initialize this and say cipher.init app, and we'll use app. So we're going to be using this secret key. So that's why this must be super secure. So now we're using it for two things, to protect our cookies and also for our encryption. All right, or you can set a new one if you want, but let's keep it simple. So we have this cipher now. Cipher is the name that we're using. Cipher is what we're going to use to encrypt. Now if you go to the documentation of this simple crypt, you'll see exactly how to use this there. So one of the things we want to do, let's see if I can find the documentation and show you how to get it. Flax simple. Right, so let me see. Yeah, we have it here. So you come to this URL and you'll find description and documentation on how to install beer pip if you want to clone from GitHub, and then the sample usage. So you see what we just did there is here. So when you set your app secret key, you can actually use that here. And then for us to encrypt the data, we just pass that into the encrypt method of these cipher objects that we have created. And when we want to decrypt, we'll also pass the encrypted data to the decrypt method of the cipher object. And you see, they gave us a comprehensive example on how to use that. So always make sure that documentation is your friend, so you know how to use new dependencies. All right, so let's go back there. Now we have done this. We have created an object and we named that cipher. We want to now say that we want to get the values that are entered. If we look at the register form, we have named the email input email, and we named the role. So we know what the names are, and then the submit value is submit, just the value of the submit button. We come here and we want to get those names now. So we'll say email is equal to result email, because that is the key to get the value. And then we'll say we're not entering password, it's just the role is equal to result role. We want to encrypt the email because we want it to be saved in encryption format. We don't want it any sensitive information saved in the database, and we don't want any data leak to affect the user's email and password combination. So let's name this email like it is in the documentation, and we'll say is equal to cipher.encrypt. We're encrypting the email, and we want to now insert into the database just the email we're encrypting. Every time you want to insert record, you want to think about what you want to do with sensitive information. And when we insert record into the maternity records, client's personal information, we will see that we want to encrypt everything that is identifiable by the client, and then maybe decrypt it on the interface for those who are authorized to see those level of information. So that way, when there's a data breach and data is stolen, we don't have our secret key stored anywhere along with the data that anybody will know how to decrypt that, because we have them in our environment file that resides on our server or on our system. So we keep that layer of encryption and data safe. We want to insert now. We want to use this function, insert data. We specify the engine, the table, and then all the keyword tags, which are the column names, to insert the record into the system. So just like we did previously, we will just come here to say insert data. We'll call the function. We'll put the engine. Let's just use keyword tags for most of these things so we don't make mistakes. Engine, I don't think this will find the engine from this function because the scope ends here. So let's just define the engine again and say engine is equal to, if I say engine is equal to engine, I think it will have a problem locating here. So let's just call the function create engine. So engine is equal to create engine, and how we define it here is app.config, just everything here that we want to put there for engine. So we can do it better next time. So that's why I say do not watch videos in isolation, watch it sequentially to the end, because they build upon themselves to get to professional level. So engine is equal to create engine. So we specify the first argument for the first parameter, which is engine. The second parameter is the table. What table do we want to insert into? So let's go back here and we'll say the table that we want to insert into is the users table. So we'll say table is equal to we can actually use base.method. No, we'll not use that. Let's make it simple again this time. Let's do users.user since we imported it already. Here we imported base. We can actually use the base, but I want you to understand it first. Import users here. So let's say the table is users.user, and then we want to now specify the keyword arguments, which are the columns that we have. We have email, and we want the email to be equal to the value we want to send is the encrypted value, enc email. So recall, or you will remember, when we are creating the form for them to enter their email and set their password, or when we send out the emails from the system, you want to make sure you remember that the email is encrypted and it has to be decrypted. Any transaction you do between requesting data and sending data there, you have to do the encrypt and decrypt through that transaction. So we're sending the encrypted value of the email. And then for the password, because I think it is it doesn't allow null, so let's put password is equal to an empty space. Let's leave it there. But I think it allows null for them to be able to set it. We'll just leave it as empty like this, since we are not setting a password, and role is equal to role. So now you see how we have used the function we created in the util file to want to insert record. When we created this function, we just use context manager to connect to the database and execute an insert statement here. And we made it general or dynamic, where it gets the table name and it gets the values as the keyword arguments. And then we use prefix with ignore just to say it should insert ignore. So it's just the same syntax as saying insert ignore into table name, like we do in my SQL raw file. So if you put the ignore here, if that record already exists, it does not put an error to stop the insert from happening, especially when many records have been inserted at the same time and simultaneously. You don't want to halt the system just because one of the record fails. You just want it to ignore and move on. Okay? We'll also add the error handling here to see how that goes. So let's see if this even works before we go further. What we expect to happen is that whatever we enter into the form should insert into the database. So let's go back to look at the table. So it will insert into the users table in this database. So we have this table users, and there's no record here. We want to make sure that we have an encrypted email, a blank password, the role that we have a timestamp created as, and an auto increments 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 there. We have our register form here, but we'll go to the index page to start all over. We have to run this file to start that. So we'll run the file. If all is well, it should start the app. So it started and active and is on port 8080. If we want to refresh this to see that we have the form. Let's enter an email, test@test.com, and we'll enter a role. Let's select the role to be admin and we submit. We have this success page, which means everything is well. But let's go to the tables and see. And we have it inserted. The email is encrypted, the password is blank, the role is admin, and the timestamp of when we created it in the database. Does anyone have questions? Is it understandable, or should I go over and summarize what we've done again?
Understandable.
Okay. Is it the same for everyone? Does anyone want a re-explanation, or we understand it?
I understand.
Okay. All right, so I will make the video available and we'll send an invitation for tomorrow's class where we will discuss Ginger templating in details for you to have a background knowledge of the things that we did leading up to this, so that we don't get lost in our final project. All right?
Ms. Fakoya, sorry.
Yeah.
The last class that happened on Tuesday, will that recording also be available along with this one?
Yes, both will be posted together today, as soon as they become available. Now, the other one is available. I was waiting for this to be available, so I post both for week 17 at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so just watch out for the WhatsApp group chat and you will get a notification for the next class schedule. We're going to put as many classes as possible for us to complete everything we need to know before we officially end this course. All right, so thank you everyone and happy new month.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Happy New Month. Thank you.
Bye.